Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode 240 even. We're 3 weeks away from a route review. But this is Converting Coaches Part 4, The Diner. And this is the 4th coach in the train. Usually like the 7th, 6th or 7th or 8th car behind the extra coal and the water. And that said, it is one of the... Actually, it's not really one of the later ones. I wouldn't say that. Although, yeah, I don't know. Because it started off very early and continued until very late. And the reason for that is because it's one of the more complicated cars. It uses a lot of... It uses a lot of things that we had to install in it. For example, a counter, an actual kitchen area like a stovetop, which we were going to use an electric stove for a while, and we did keep with us an electric cooktop, but we decided to go with a gas stove, and we put a gas reservoir in the ceiling of the coach. There was actually, in the sort of, what is that style of roof called? But you guys know what I mean. It's got the thing. Oh my god. Why is it escaping me? I know this. Either way, if it comes to me, it comes to me. But it has extra space up on the roof. And so we were able to put reservoirs of stuff up there, and this is not the first time we did that, and I've talked about it before as well. So we put a reservoir of natural gas up there. We actually put several cylinders that we could refill from any place with a natural gas reservoir. And so that was used for the stove and the oven, which they were fairly small deals. It was more of a kitchen suited for a small household, but it was used to feed a small army. And so basically the kitchen staff worked all the time. They worked pretty much constantly to make food that would be available for everyone, like, for everyone when they needed it, or, at a meal. In order to make a meal's worth of food for 30 people or so, it would take a significant amount of effort, even using canned stuff. And when the kitchen was not in service, because we didn't have a lot of fresh or cookable food, then we would resort to rations and the kitchen would be out of service, basically. But we still used that area. That was lined up with tables. They were more like... they were, in essence, a dining car setup, where it was just booths. Although the booths were kind of closely packed. I'm not sure in the stuff that I've written I've really given a good indication of what it looked like in there, because I feel like when I wrote it almost as if it was more spacious, like you could maneuver through it. It's a very tight area, and most of the time you don't sit and eat in the diner. You go into the lounge maybe, but you'll go outside. Because generally when we're stopping to eat, the whole train is stopped. So, we, of course, took the seats out of that coach. We came in, we took part of one of the walls off, like we had before, to get a stove in there. We built counters out of wood, and then topped them with, it wasn't like stone, it was like linoleum or something. It was something, fairly inexpensive and easy to cut and put into place. Actually, I think we did vinyl in a couple of places, but that did not hold up, as you might expect. It was just easy to shape, and it gave us a smooth top surface. But we eventually made all that countertops linoleum, which also didn't really hold up the best, but it was light, and it was easy to just put on the wood there, and the kitchen suffered through the years and had to deal with a lot of maintenance. But so we had the back counter which had like appliances, stuff like that. We didn't have a dishwasher. We had a sink, which we would use to wash dishes in, of course. We had cabinets and stuff like that. We didn't necessarily carry around all of our own china and stuff like that, but we did carry around enough, like, for the train crew, and when stuff got damaged, we would go after a restaurant or something. You know, it was very lawless, you know, and I talk about this, oh, we went here and we took this, we went here and we took this. It was pretty lawless, and I can admit, yeah, we were effectively stealing, but there was nobody that was there in all cases or alive in other cases. If we could trade for stuff, we generally would trade for it. But we had to do a lot of scavenging because that gave us what we could barter with. And that was really important. So, cooktop, stove, microwave oven, which that was a power suck. We tried not to use that. As if I'm going to pretend the stovetop was not. Or the cooktop, again, because the stove was gas. We didn't have adequate ventilation in there originally. A clerestory. That's something, and that's the word for the roof. We didn't have adequate ventilation at first, especially after we installed the gas tanks, because we sort of blocked off a lot of the vents up there. So then we had to install new vents. But it was basically, at that point, it was just the top of the coach was filled in. There was a counter along the left side of the coach with a stove in the middle of it, a sink in part of it, you know, next to the stove, and then stuff on the counter, like, you know, little appliances on the counter. That was it for a while, and we sort of lived with it that way. And then we started bringing in tables to turn into that area, and so that actually drew people in. People wanted to come in and they wanted to hang around in the coach, and so then they would start getting in the way of the cooks. And that became a problem, so what happened was, that's when we started building the second counter, and we had a window so you could sit and, you know, not order food, but it's where the food would be put out, so you didn't walk by the kitchen. So we ended up building a wall almost down the center of the coach, in order to give the cooks enough room. The problem was the coach was not really wide enough for that, so we had to cut the counter back at each end, and then we had to cut the left counter back at each end, and then we could put as many tables as we wanted, but got rid of the tables in the middle. So then you had just sort of an area in the middle of the coach that was dedicated for the kitchen. And it was a little bit tight in there. It sort of looked like an Amtrak cafe car. And just in terms of basic design, not in terms of how it actually looked, because for a long time it just looked very rough. It was just plywood. Most of it wasn't painted. The countertop itself, like I said, was basically whatever we had to throw in there and just use as a countertop, something that wouldn't get damaged too much. And after that, so it stayed like that for a while, and then it started to deteriorate. And so what we did was we replaced the plywood and we painted it. And we painted most of what we could paint where it would survive, basically. What we could paint where there wouldn't be food touching it, so the walls and stuff. Also, the lighting in there was tricky. So we started using, like lamps on tables, but that was really ineffective and it took up space. Then we got fluorescent bulbs to put, sort of above the tables, and that worked for a while, but it's tough to find those, and they would tend to get jostled around. And then we ended up going with these light fixtures that were attached to the ceiling that used just a regular bulb. We did worry about those because regular bulbs get very hot, but that never caused too much of a problem in there. We did keep a couple of fire extinguishers in the diner. Some were outside the dining area, some were inside the dining area. But for the most part, everything was copacetic. You know, it was a tight coach. That was the number one problem with it, is after we finished building everything, there was not a lot of walking room inside of that coach. And so that sort of incentivized people to not go in there, to just get in there, get their food, and get out. And so then it flipped back the other way, where you didn't have too many people staying in there. It was, you know, just a weird sort of progression with how many people stayed in the diner or not. Now, the thing with the diner was, we didn't store most of the food in there. There wasn't a lot of room for food storage. We stored a lot of cooking supplies, but if the diner needed something, especially something perishable, it would be stored in a boxcar or a reefer car if we had one at that point in time. And that made it a little bit inconvenient for them, so they had to know what they were going to cook ahead of time. They had to know what we had, and they had to be able to get to all of our food in just the periods we were stopped, and they would take it out of the boxcars or wherever it was stored. Sometimes it was stored in the storage coach, which was at the end of the line of coaches, and that happened. It wasn't, I won't say it was rare, but it wasn't the most common occurrence. And so then they could get it in the meantime, but if they needed something on the fly, if it wasn't in there, they were SOL, they were out of luck. So, that said, the menu was usually predetermined and fairly sparse, even. It wasn't exactly, you know, we didn't eat extravagant meals, obviously. I'm not sure why, you know, I'm sure you didn't think we did. We were fairly, we had to be fairly cautious about eating a lot, because we didn't know when necessarily we'd get a good supply again. And so, that, you know, that progression took a good few years. Just moving from, okay, you know, empty coach to we're making food in here to we built a counter and got appliances in, to we got a bunch of tables in, we need to put a wall up. We put the wall up, we divided the coach, you know, and then that was sort of its final form, and that's how it survives today. So, yeah, that was kind of a historic coach, I guess. Well, they all work, because, you know, the Zombie Train Incorporated obviously pulls everything from the original Zombie Train, and that means that these pieces are, like, especially holy, I guess is the right word. They're sought after. They go around, almost on tour now that the war is effectively over. And, you know, most of the fleet has been retired. Again. But, anyways, that is the diner. That was interesting to see its progression. It was one of the things that kept changing and changing and changing, and there was never, like, a vision for it until the very end. And it's not necessarily what you want to happen. You want to go into a big project like that knowing what the end point is going to look like. And, well, oh well. But anyways, I want to say right now, because I didn't say it at the top of the show, the footage, of course, is from Under Construction. It's coming out at the same time, but because this is filmed about a day later, I can say this. Tolbrand Peninsula, or the Tolbrand Peninsula, Alpha 0.2, and its session are available on the download station right now, if you want to check it out. If you want to play around with it. It's not multiplayer ready yet. It's not done, I would say. But it is... It's good. Olive and the Olive Branch are pretty much done, and next episode of Under Construction will be moving on past Olive to the south. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week. And I'll work on getting a multiplayer session available for the Olive Branch. Not that there's really a lot you can do with more than one person in that area, but We'll see. Train Man out.